Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. Wow, I'm not dead. Well, technically I am dead, but I'm referring to the figurative sense. Let's just say that over the last 3 weeks, some stuff went sideways hard. I won't bore you all with the details. I wrote a few Minds.com posts about it if you're curious to know. Let's just say that we had kind of a financial scare that has since been resolved. Now that everything is more or less back to normal, I'm hoping to get back on a more regular video schedule again. This one I'd actually begun a few weeks ago and is now technically outdated since I'm actually at just over 1,100 subscribers now. Thank you, by the way, I'm super humbled by all your support. But in order to make up for that, I'm going to add a little bit of a rant after the first part of this video about something that's been annoying me. Someone suggested in the comment section of one of my videos that I could do a video demonstrating exactly how I go about drawing Prim, and I thought that might indeed be a fun way to go about celebrating. So basically, I'll just kind of talk you through the process, and then I'll get into the thing that annoyed me after it. So here we go. The program that I use to draw my panels is called Autodesk, and I use an Android tablet. I've sped up this video quite a bit so that you don't have to sit through the entire 30-minute process to draw it, but I'll try to explain what tools I'm using since it might be a little bit harder to follow sped up like this. I almost always use the paintbrush tool because it seems to be the easiest to alter the size and the opacity. Basically, I usually start off by trying to draw a rough outline of Prim's head. I usually go into an older drawing I have saved to copy the purple color over, just to prevent my earlier mistake of having inconsistent colors between panels. I don't tend to worry so much about the other colors like the blue on the inside of the robe or the color of the scythe handle, since these details don't seem to be quite as noticeable. After I get the initial outline of the head, I usually create kind of a shadow under the main figure, and then I draw the bow. I can use the selection tool to move around the head as needed because I almost always seem to draw it too high or too low to begin with. After this, I usually start to fill in the inside of the hood, but I always prefer to leave the eyes until the very end. It's just kind of my thing. Throughout this process, I'm constantly trying to smooth things out because it helps me to get a better idea of how the entire panel as a whole is going to look in the end. After this, I usually start working on the body. Given that Prim just wears a flowing robe, usually I just draw a rough idea for how far out it should go based on whether she's sitting or standing. I'm not necessarily focused on getting it perfect at this point, as I often have to wait and see how it looks in the entire context of the picture. Also, I'm sorry for some of my spastic zooming. Oftentimes during the process, I'll zoom in and out to see how something looks and see if it needs to be altered. The fill tool in this program does this really annoying thing where it technically fills, but it leaves this white line all around the edges of the area it's filled in, so I generally have to go around and fix that as I go. Oh well, I guess it saves me from having to fill it in entirely like this. So you might notice here I can change the opacity of the brush and select darker colors to shade in certain areas like the intersection of the sleeves and in the bow. When I start doing the bow and the bell, I usually shade and outline them immediately, just to get them out of the way. I always have a bit of trouble drawing the hands. Oftentimes I'll start by making them too small or too big, and I'll have to constantly go back and forth to try and get it exactly right. Next, I'll do the shoes. My original clay figure never really had any feet, so I always just kind of envisioned it wearing these big clunky shoes just for comedic effect. The only time this isn't the case, of course, is in the affectionately named Smexy pose, but that was just more or less for comedic purposes and isn't really how I envision her. So it's about now that I might start using the pencil tool to outline everything in dark gray. I choose gray instead of black because I want to keep the black for when I want things to really pop out. I also use the pencil for when I want to fill in very small areas with color or produce fine details. So now I might start making adjustments to the whole figure based on how everything looks. Things like adjusting where the cloak lies based on the feet, or thinning out certain areas that don't look quite right. Admittedly, normally I would be a little more strict in making sure that my colors match than I am right here, but as I was recording this one and I was on a little bit of a time limit, I cheated a little and went with what was close enough because I figured you guys would get the point. After I get all the outlining done, I usually turn down the opacity and start shading the cloak. I do a dark underline, but I also do a lighter layer in certain areas to make the figure pop a little bit. I'm not exactly an expert at this sort of thing yet, but I do feel like I've improved a bit over time, and I'm starting to learn what looks good. So now that I've finished the main figure, I'll draw any other details that I want to add. For this one, I'm drawing a party hat because she's having a celebration. And a bottle of wine because it's an especially good celebration. I'll admit that some of the finer details on this image were a little bit rushed because it's my first time recording the whole process, but you get the general idea anyway. After everything else is done, now is when I like to draw the eyes. I always save them for last, I'm not really sure why. Somehow it just feels right. Often this is one of the things that takes me the longest to draw properly because I always take extra time to make sure that they're smoothed out perfectly. After all, Prim doesn't have a mouth, so her eyes are pretty much the sole means of expression she has. I feel like I've gotten pretty good at making them more expressive as I've gone on. So yeah, I cheated a bit and left out the scythe, sue me. Now that I've gotten the hang of using this tool, I might do something like this more often, record myself drawing images and then just ranting over them when I get a quick little thing to talk about. We'll see. Now the aforementioned brief rant that I promised. I know other people have talked about this already, but I want to talk about the female Doctor Who. Not even really just her, honestly, but about the whole my god, female lead role thing that I've been seeing a lot. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first place that I learned about the new Doctor Who was on Facebook. Now, I'm not one to expect gold standard conversation from Facebook, but there was a particularly large amount of frothing over this topic. Now, I wouldn't necessarily be all that bothered if it was just Doctor Who fans being stoked about a lady who... But that's not what most of the comments were about. No, instead, most of the comments were things like, "Haha, take that, men! Look at all the man babies crying about the fact that there's a female Doctor Who! Haha, poor men get to have another one of their favorite shows taken over by women." These guys aren't happy they're getting a female Doctor Who. They think they're pulling one over on men who just can't stand to have women in their favorite TV shows. Only, that's not the case at all. And I don't understand where they would get that idea, quite frankly. Some of the most celebrated characters from many different genres are women. Captain Janeway, Wonder Woman, Ripley, Scully from X-Files. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say they preferred the male Shepard to the female Shepard from Mass Effect. Not to mention all of the beloved female sidekicks in many shows. There has been a ton of diversity in these kinds of shows, and anyone who pretends otherwise is being deliberately obtuse. See, that's part of what really bothers me about it. These guys are actively pretending that all of these other examples don't exist in order to be able to feel like they're sticking it to the man now. When normal people appreciate characters, they're doing so because the character is interesting, compelling, relatable, and normally completely regardless of the character's external traits. Social justice warriors, on the other hand, don't really care about that. First of all, they want the character to be a mirror image of them. You've probably seen plenty of people complaining about the fact that femdoc is still white or cis. I have. They say, "Oh, I have no characters to relate to," because for some reason, they have difficulty putting themselves in other people's shoes unless that other person looks exactly like them. Maybe it's just because they're all so unique. But sometimes, even looking into a mirror isn't good enough. The character also has to be perfect and devoid of negative characteristics. You give these kinds of characters any sort of flaw, and all of a sudden you're lining up for accusations of misogyny. It really fits in with the sort of narcissism you see from these groups. Anyway, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who will enjoy this character, but there will be plenty who only enjoy her because she's a woman. Just like how many people were simply happy that the new Ghostbusters were women, or just like those who will inevitably be happy when they eventually put out a pandering Jane Bond as well. But everyone else who can see right through this will just be irritated. People aren't stupid. It's obvious when a character is being written because the author or screenwriter wants to tell an actual story, or when it's because they're just trying to pander. I really don't understand why so many franchises are doing this when it's clear that it's not doing them any good. Now, I'll fully admit that I don't watch Doctor Who, but from what I've heard from other people, this is definitely a case of pandering. Now, me being someone who doesn't personally know the show, Brian was kind enough to share an interesting thought with me about this. In the past, the sidekick character to the Doctor, who I'm pretty sure has been a woman, if not 100% of the time, then certainly most of the time, has been nearly as loved as the main character himself. Brian said this character has often served as a moral compass for the Doctor. This is one way in which they could make this one interesting, if they had a male companion serving as the woman Doctor's moral compass. However, I expect they're not going to do this. I'm pretty sure this is going to be all about girl power, because to hell with men, am I right? But enough about that garbage. Speaking of Brian, I'm sure you've all heard what's going on with him. If not, I urge you to go to Honey Badger Radio and get caught up on it. I'll also be linking to their fundraiser for his medical costs. It's going to be enough of a battle for him to fight this. We can help him by lessening some of those burdens on him. Even if you can spare a little bit, every little bit will help right now. Lastly, I'm just going to do a little bit of self-promoting here. I'm going to link a cafe event I'll be speaking at in Calgary. It's not really a super big thing. I'm just going to be giving a talk and meeting with everyone. However, it would be nice to see some of you guys too if you can make it out. This is going to be happening Saturday, August 12th, and I'll link the meetup page in the description bar so you can learn about the details. In the meantime, I'm sorry to have kept you all waiting for so long. I'm trying to get back into the swing of things, so bear with me. I actually am working on the next misused words script, and I'm thinking that's going to be the next video that I put out, unless something particularly egregious pops up and gives me something new to talk about. And of course, as always, I'll be doing shows with Honey Badger Radio, even if I don't have as much time to do my own stuff. So, sorry for the absence, thank you very much for your support and patience, and I hope to see you all in the next one.